What if the world you trust is scaffolded by a number you barely notice? What if your days, your seasons, the way justice is weighed and destiny is told, all hinge on the quiet geometry of 12? The clock hangs like a halo of hours, and at the crown position, a simple toithus watches you move. 12 months cradle your year in a ring of promise and decay. 12 strangers can strip a person of freedom or grant it back. Across myths and empires, on stone altars and courtroom wood, the same integer surfaces like an ancient god that learned to wear a mask. You can feel it, can't you? Humming beneath habit's noise, a deliberate order that says, here are the edges of the day. Here are the gates of the city. Here are the names of the stars. Let's step backward into the night when the number first learned to speak. Long before you, a Babylonian priest raised a reed stylus and cut little wedges into a clay tablet while the sky wheeled above him. The moon doesn't keep perfect faith. It slides between 12 and 13 cycles a year. But the ancients persuaded heaven to behave by dividing the zodiac into 12 rooms. A belt of beasts and heroes, 12 houses the wandering lights would visit in their long pilgrimage through time. The Sumerians showed them the way with base 60, a friendly giant of a system whose bones still harden your minutes and degrees. 12 sits inside 60 like a seed in a pomegranate, ready to multiply. The Egyptians walked with Ra through 12 caverns of night and sailed with him back into morning. They cleaved the day into hours and never looked away from the way shadow and light are born in a circle. In Greece, a different ring formed. On Olympus, 12 thrones, a pantheon that could quarrel and remake the weather, measured not by height but by number. Down on the earth's roads walked a man more muscle than myth, given a sentence in 12 chapters. Heracles had to clean filth and catch lightning, to steal cattle and drag a three-headed future into the light. 12 labors, each a wrestle with the world's insolence, each a ledger mark in the account of chaos being reduced to order. Across a different desert, 12 sons would be born to Jacob. 12 tribes would pitch 12 tents on 12 patches of hope. A breastplate worn by the high priest would glitter with 12 stones, each cut to remember a people's name. Across a table, a teacher broke bread and counted out not gold, but men, 12 of them, the appointed mirror of those tribes, the echo chamber of a promise made of breath and dust and text. Farther east, the cycle becomes fur and whisker and claw. O'Tale says the Jade Emperor invited the animals to a race, and 12 won their places in the calendar of Chinese years. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, pig. A carousel of temperaments, a way to pin identity on birthdays and tell the time by personality. In India, a sun god's aspects are 12-fold, called the Adityas, and the world under Jupiter's slow crown turns with festivals every 12 years, when rivers become streets of devotion and the Kumbh Mela swells into a city of pilgrims and ash. You could be standing on a riverbank in Haridwar or in a London market 2,000 years later, and the word would still be the same in your hand, dozen. 12 as a convenient bite of time and trade. 12 as a ritual breath. The Romans tried to turn chaos into a portable object. They wrote law on 12 tables and drilled it into public memory. Imagine them posted in the forum, bronzed, glaring in the sun. Property, family, crime, debt, all hammered into lines the way a carpenter checks a frame with a square. The consul walked with 12 lictors, guards holding rods bound around an axe, like a moving signal that near the beating heart of the state, order is not a suggestion. That same empire would receive a calendar repair that you still use every time you ask what month it is. Julius Caesar, impatient with slipping seasons, tore the year down and rebuilt it, but left 12 standing. January and February had wandered around the year's edge. Now they were anchored. 12 months, 31, 30, 28 and change, hardened into a habit your bones no longer question. Once the pattern sinks, you can find it everywhere. 12 inches pretend to be a foot and march across workbenches and roads. 12 jurors file into a room with stale coffee, a black plastic clock, and the electric hush of a life in balance. 12 stars ring a blue flag for a union that decided the number could symbolize completeness without a math of membership. 12 notes climb the chromatic ladder, repeating an octave like a secret you left in another room and only remembered halfway up the next stair. Pauses, too, are measured this way. 12 bars of blues, a reliquary of rhythm that can cradle sorrow and swagger and whatever you pour into it. If you are patient with why, other voices arrive. The Pythagoreans, who believed number was not merely a measure, but the fabric of the real, saw 12 as a marriage. 3 is the triangle, the minimum unit of shape and the ancient sign of divinity. 4 is the square, the wind crossed with the earth, the seasons laid against the compass. 3 times 4, heaven times earth, yields a 12 that stakes the high and the low into one fence. Plato later dreamed in shapes, and in the Timaeus imagined a dodecahedron, the 12-faced jewel, as the pattern the creator used for the whole. If you could hold the cosmos, he suggested, it might fit in your palm like a many-sided die, its 12 faces shining with a polite kind of inevitability. Mystics turned the number into a liturgy of correspondence. In the Sefer Yetzirah, a short and mysterious Hebrew text about making worlds with letters, 12 of the Hebrew alphabet's 22 letters are called simple, affiliated with the months, the tribes, the directions. The Second Temple period community at Qumran, whose scrolls would sleep in caves until the 20th century, structured itself with a council that balanced 12 laymen with 3 priests. In a later branch of Islam known as Twelver Shi'ism, 12 imams constitute a chain of spiritual authority, the last of whom is hidden, expected to return at the end of days. The number becomes a scriptural refrain. In that final vision of Revelation, a city drops from heaven glittering like a cutstone, its gates and foundations counted in 12s. 12 gates, 12 angels, 12 pearls, 12 fruits ripening month after month. The arithmetic of hope. Historians and anthropologists often prefer more practical angels. 12, they note, is a divisible darling. It breaks elegantly into halves and thirds and quarters and sixths. For markets that measured without machines, 12 was a social technology, a shared fairness. A merchant could cut a rope of sausages into equal portions with easy certainty. A customer could reckon quickly without needing to invent a new hand. Speaking of hands, there's a whisper that runs through bazaars and schoolrooms in ancient accounts, that 12 came from fingers, not the 10 you're used to counting with, but the bones inside them. Touch your thumb to the 3 segments of each of the other 4 fingers, and you can count to 12 on one hand, to 24 on 2. The word dozen becomes a thumbprint of motion, a casual calculus. But if you think you can understand a number simply by calling it useful, try to sleep the night before a verdict. In a windowless room, 12 chairs gather like an altar. The air hums with recirculated breath. On the table, a manila folder is a heavy bird. One juror runs a finger under the word instruction. One stares at the door, another watches the clock. 12 is not just arithmetic, it is ritual. In that room, people pour their private moralities into a shared container and wait for them to settle. It is fragile alchemy, and it leaves a taste. When the foreperson finally speaks, nobody reaches for a calculator. The number 12 flexes a different muscle. An old one trained in sanctuaries and councils, a muscle that thinks in chorus. There is another story about 12 that predates any court and refuses to sit in one place. Near the edge of the classical world, bards sang of Charlemagne's paladins, the 12 peers. The medieval brain counted by dozens on a field of honor. It felt right. The number ordered the tale. And much earlier, Older than paladins and courts, a man whose name means glory of Hera took an impossible sentence that ended in a last labor, a descent. Heracles went down into Hades itself to bring up a hound with 3 heads. If you strip the story of its bronze and vines and leave only the skeleton, you're left with a number as a ladder. With each rung, the hero breaks a wild thing and forces the world into a kind of polite shape. Not perfect, not pure, but more owned by daylight than before. If you listen to a psychologist instead of a priest or a poet, a different truth arrives. The mind loves clusters. It loves patterns it can carry without dropping. 12 is not too big and not too small. A tribe can recognize itself in 12 names. A group can sit around a table and not feel lost. Even contemporary branding evangelists talk about 12 archetypes, trying to fit a messy human range into a box you can buy. That map is a modern invention, true and obsessed with tidiness, but it confesses something older. We survive by chopping the chaos into 12 and building from there. And then there is the clock, that modest tyrant. Why a dozen hours twice instead of 1 to 24? Because clocks once copied the slow theater of shadow. Day and night were different kingdoms, each deserved a sequence. 12 hours of light, 12 of dark, a repeating twinship that turned the sky into a wheel. When mechanical clocks took over from the sundial and the water clock, they kept the wheel but made it precise. Metal teeth replaced the sun. In the industrial age, time sharpened into a blade that cut wages and schedules. But the face stayed polite. A circle, 12 marks, a pair of hands, even when the minutes and seconds hacked away underneath. The symbol lovers among us find 12 everywhere else. On a blue rectangle of cloth, 12 golden stars circle like a halo, chosen not for the number of nations, but for the shape of completeness itself. In AA basements where coffee sits in styrofoam and the floor is honest, a group follows 12 steps out of a ravenous spiral. 12 is not magic there. It is a ladder made of sentences and other people. In conservatories and dim bars, musicians speak in the tongue of 12 without needing to mention the scale. A keyboard is a straightened galaxy, white and black. 12 notes written again and again, arranged into octave constellations. In watch catalogues, the number 12 becomes a crest, a gleam. Advertisers freeze time at 10:10 to frame it, but 12 hovers above, a familiar crown. At this point, you might feel the number gathering too neatly, like a conspiracy. Resist the easy fever. Patterns are genuine and meanings are real, but reality also resists singular stories. Not every culture enthroned 12. The Mesoamerican calendars beat their own time, and in the Hebrew year of lunations, an intercalary month sometimes arrives to keep festivals married to harvest. Systems wobble and are corrected. The world allows for edits. Yet somehow 12 remains, stubborn as a prayer. In Christian art, a carpenter's last long meal is frozen under a vaulted ceiling. 12 men lean into shock and grief, while a 13th leaves the frame. In modern film, 12 angry men sweat under ceiling fans, deciding a boy's life. In the Bible's last pages, 12 multiplies into a vast assembly, 12 times 1,000, a rhetoric of incalculable completeness. In each case, the number is a lightly veiled promise that the story will close its own circle. If you ask a philosopher for the last word, you might receive a shape instead. Take a dodecahedron in your hand, a model made of wood or plastic. Roll it on a table. Each face is a pentagon, 5 edges meeting like a quiet star. There's a rumor, told and retold since antiquity, that Plato reserved this shape for the cosmos itself, as if the universe wanted to live inside a 12-sided skin. Does the rumor hold water? The Timaeus hints, scholastics argue, historians hedge. But the appeal is obvious. 12 faces to shelter the whole. An elegant casing, not to trap, but to articulate. a geometry of saying, this is everything and everything belongs. Some nights are made for simple proof, though. Walk out under a winter sky and look for Orion, shoulders braced with cold. Around him the zodiac girdles the ecliptic in a ring of 12. The constellations are uneven and arguable, bruised by the slow wobble of Earth's axis, their borders tidy only on charts. Stars don't care about our names, yet the human eye insists, begging the heavens to mean. It is not delusion, it is the art of survival. We teach each other by rhythm and repetition. We teach ourselves by slicing boundlessness into 12 footprints we can memorize. Thus, commerce becomes fair. Thus, time becomes shared. Thus, stories become carryable. And so a number becomes an architecture. You trust it because it doesn't ask for faith, only for use. 12 makes a dozen eggs crated into a kitchen. 12 makes a foot that can be divided into inches on a carpenter's tongue. 12 makes a jury room door click shut and a clock face breathe. 12 makes a flag both circle and star. 12 makes prayer beads and calendars and engines of music. And when the number appears on skin, Roman numerals etched into forearms, it announces something private, that someone has decided their days will count in a way that feels inherited and deliberate. Whatever you think of the sacred, 12 is where the human habit of ordering the world brushes against the sublime. It is a number not because it is merely 12 things, but because it can hold together bone and bronze, temple and traffic court, zodiac and wristwatch. It is ancient without being dusty, modern without being metallic. In a century that wants to replace everything with data, 12 remains a hand measure that still works. When you catch yourself looking at the clock again and the hands sit together at the top like old friends, take a breath. Remember the priests and merchants and philosophers keeping vigil under the same crown of hours. Remember that the universe is too big to hold, but somehow still lets you carry a small, shining piece of it. Remember that even order can be a tender thing, not a cage, but a cadence. 12 repeats. We step into the loop, we remember our name. So tonight, when you put your phone face down and the room grows honest, peel back the day and see the number underneath it. The one that held your appointments and your meals, and the lift doors and the trains and the tiny rude clock on your oven. 12 is not a secret. It is a signature. It is the ghost that takes shape when a species decides it wants to keep time together. The next time someone asks why 12 is everywhere, show them your hand. Turn it in the dim light. Trace the bones with your thumb. Count softly. Smile at the thought that somewhere a priest is still chalking a circle in the sand. A judge is still arranging the seats. A musician is still tuning the last note of the scale. And an old philosopher is still coaxing a 12-faced world to fit. And when the year rolls over again and the months repopulate your calendar like familiar guests returning to a table, raise an invisible glass to the quiet sovereign that made their reunion possible. Not to magic or cabal or conspiracy, but to the long human habit of finding a shape that works and keeping it. 12 is our pact with rhythm, our handshake with the wheel of the sky. It built a city of before and after. It will be there in the morning, exactly where you left it, at the top of the face where all ages meet.